Text, UCLA Undergraduate Education Disability Studies. Lauren Lee McCarthy.
My name is Lauren Lee McCarthy, and I'm an artist and a professor in design media arts. I think that the art and design can learn a lot from disability studies in terms of thinking about how we experience and perceive the world and design for that. And I think the arts are really great at imagining things that are not yet possible or seem impractical or unreasonable, which I think is what is necessary for really gonna shift things in terms of disability justice. Part of my work really deals with social interaction, how we relate to each other on a day-to-day basis, and specifically thinking about what constitutes normal, or what are normal interactions and what happens when you fall outside of that. So I think this comes from just my experience as an autistic person and finding that I'm not quite fitting into the expected interaction. So that's kind of where the work started. One of the first series of pieces I made were called Tools for Improved Social Interaction. So they're all starting with things that I felt like I had gotten feedback that I didn't do well. So for example, people were telling me, you're supposed to smile on these particular occasions, or you're supposed to make physical contact or shake someone's hand. And so I made a series of wearable devices that would kind of train your brain to do that. So for example, there was a hat that would detect if I was smiling, and if I stopped smiling, it would stab me in the back of the head until I smiled again. So that was a really early project, but it's kind of evolved and grown over time into these different kind of social prosthetics in some way that are meant to be very critical on one hand, almost dystopic to the point of saying, what are we trying to do? Shoehorn everyone into a one very limiting definition of normal. And then on the other hand, asking, but what is the potential of technology to open up different ways of interacting with each other? So I teach in the design media arts department, and it's really the space in between design and art and technology. A lot of my work deals specifically with code and with the internet, making things for the internet and what the social and political implications of that are. And so one big intersection with disability studies is thinking about accessibility on the internet. So ways that people use the internet, browse content, experience things online when they have disabilities, and how to make things that are more accessible and inclusive. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this work is that it's often seen sort of as an accommodation. Let's add some captions, but actually I really see it as a huge potential, a creative prompt to think about how do you actually experience different modalities of content? How do different people experience that? I think everyone has a very different experience. So if we can kind of acknowledge that we're not all starting in the same place, that we're all paying attention to or taking in different senses, how do we really design art experiences or design experiences with that in mind? Disability studies being so interdisciplinary and having so many different perspectives and stakeholders really pushes me in my own research, or when I'm teaching, pushes the students to look at a problem from many different angles, to not just jump to one conclusion, but to see the first task as understanding what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What is the need that we're trying to address? What are our assumptions about how that might be solved, and what happens if we put some of those assumptions aside?
Additional image credits, Lauren McCarthy. http://lauren-mccarthy.com www.disabilitystudies.ucla.edu